In this video, we're diving into one of the deadliest events in human history, the Black Death. A plague so terrifying it wiped out millions of people and turned entire cities into ghost towns. But what was it really like to live through this nightmare? Stay tuned to find out. And before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this. The year is 1348. It is autumn in the city of London. The nights have grown cool enough that chimneys breathe thin white smoke into the dark, and the smell of wood smoke drifts through the narrow streets like a kind of prayer. The stars are out tonight, more stars than most people ever bother to look at, and they hang above the city in the same patient silence they have always kept, indifferent and beautiful, scattered like embers across a wide black cloth. The Thames moves slowly beneath them. It is a wide, dark river, and tonight it carries the sound of water against with the low, rhythmic knocking of a moored barge somewhere beneath London Bridge. If you were standing on the bank, you would hear that sound. You would hear the water. You would hear the city breathing around you, the way all old cities breathe at night, slowly, unevenly, full of small sounds you cannot quite name. Rest into that sound now. The knocking of the barge, the river, the dark. There are things moving in the city tonight that no one yet understands. Word has come up from the south, from Bristol first, and before that from the ports of the south coast, from sailors who stepped off ships and said very little, and then lay down, and did not get up again. The word passed slowly from mouth to mouth, the way rumor always travels, the way it changes shape a little with each telling, the way it arrives to you already worn smooth by too many hands. People are dying, the word said. But people are always dying somewhere. London is a city of some 80,000 souls, and the dying is constant, the old, the hungry, children in winter, men who fall or drown or drink too deeply. Death is not a stranger here. It lives in the same streets and breathes the same river air. Nobody thinks much of the word that comes up from the ports. Not yet. For now, the city sleeps. Picture the streets as they are tonight. They are narrow, far narrower than anything you have walked down in your own life. The upper floors of the timber houses lean toward each other across the lane until, in places, neighbors on opposite sides could almost reach out and touch fingertips from their windows. The streets are paved with stone in the richer quarters, and with mud and straw and the remains of everything else in the poorer ones. There are smells here that would stop you in your tracks, animal and smoke and rot and bread and tallow, all of it laid together into something that is simply, unmistakably, the smell of this place and this time. But tonight the smell carries something else, faintly, something sweet and wrong. You don't notice it if you live here. You've stopped noticing most of it. The city is your whole world. And the world doesn't smell strange to you, it just smells like itself. Let that be enough, for now. Let yourself rest inside it. In a house near Grace Church Street, a candle is still burning. A woman named Agnes is sitting by a low fire. She is perhaps 40 years old, which is not young in this century, and she is mending a wool garment by the light of the candle and the light of the coals, squinting at the thread. Her hands moving with the slow sureness of a skill learned in childhood and never forgotten. Her husband is asleep on the other side of the room. Her daughter is asleep upstairs. The house is warm and smells of the stew she made earlier, the last of the autumn onions soft in the broth. She is thinking of nothing in particular. This is what most of life is, thinking of nothing in particular. Hands moving, the fire low, the night outside going about its own business. She does not know what is coming. None of them do. And for now, for just this moment, that unknowing is its own kind of peace. She is only here, in this warm room, with her needle and her thread and the quiet sound of her family breathing in the dark around her. Let yourself rest there too. The needle pulling through the cloth. The breathing in the dark. Out on the river, a ship is arriving. It has come from Bordeaux, in France. It carries wine, and wool, and rats as all ships carry rats, hidden in the ballast and the hold, in the dark warm spaces between planks where things that do not need the light prefer to live. The sailors on deck are tired. Some of them have been sick for days, but they have not spoken of it plainly, the way men at sea learn not to speak plainly of the things they fear. There are dark swellings at their throats and beneath their arms tender to the touch, hot with something building. One of the men has taken to sleeping alone, away from the others, at the very edge of the hold. He does not know what is wrong with him. He only knows that he aches in a way that has no comfortable position, that the ache is moving deeper as the days pass, that the night sweats have left him cold in the mornings despite the thick wool he wraps around himself. The ship ties up in the dark. The ropes go over the wooden piers. The water laps and the ropes creak, and all of it sounds exactly the same as every other ship tying up on every other night, which is to say, it sounds like nothing remarkable at all. The rats move first. They are quick and sure in the dark, moving along the ropes, dropping to the pier, slipping between the stacked barrels and the straw and the shadows. They have done this before in other ports, other cities. They carry their passengers with them, small, invisible, ancient passengers, and they vanish into the city the way small things vanish, without ceremony, without anyone watching. And the city breathes on. And the stars stay where they are, and the river keeps moving, as rivers do, entirely without opinion. Let your body be heavy now. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands rest open. You are watching all of this from somewhere very still from above, perhaps, like the stars, with that same patient and unhurried distance. You can see the ship and the river and the dark streets spreading out from the water like roots of a tree. You can see the candlelit window near Grace Church Street, the small warm square of it in all the darkness. You can see the sleeping city. You know what is coming, but the city does not. And there is something quietly sorrowful in that, the way the city goes on sleeping, the way the chimneys breathe their white smoke, the way the barge keeps knocking against the pier in that slow, steady rhythm. Something is beginning tonight. But beginnings are quiet things. They do not announce themselves. They arrive the way cold weather arrives first, just a sharpness in the air that you can almost ignore, and then undeniable, and then simply the world as it now is. The cold has arrived, but that is for another night, another hour. For now, the river, the stars, the warm house, the needle and the thread. 3 days have passed since the ship came in from Bordeaux. The city does not know this matters. The city does not track such things. The comings and goings of ships are too numerous, too ordinary, too tangled up in the daily business of surviving and trading and eating to be remarked upon. Dozens of ships come and go each week. Sailors arrive and disperse into the lanes and the taverns and the boarding houses near the wharves, and the city absorbs them as it absorbs everything, without ceremony, without comment. The rats have already gone deep, into the walls of the houses near the river, into the grain stores, into the spaces beneath the raised floors of the taverns, where it is dark and warm and the smell of spilled ale and old straw makes a kind of rich, dense world. They move at night, mostly. Their passengers move with them, or rather, their passengers move between them, in the way that small invisible things move, which is to say hungrily and without conscience and with no awareness at all of the size of what they are beginning. The city breathes. The river moves. 3 days. The first to fall ill is a man named Thomas. He is a docker abroad, strong man who has unloaded ships along the Thames for 20 years, whose hands are so calloused that he barely feels cold anymore, whose back has given him trouble since a crate fell badly 3 winters ago. He notices the ache first as just another version of his back, which is to say he barely notices it at all. By the second day it is something else. He is sitting in the tavern near the wharf where he drinks each evening after work, and he is very warm, far too warm for the cool October night, and there is a swelling at his neck that his fingers keep returning to, worrying at without meaning to, the way the tongue finds a sore tooth. It is tender. It is larger than it was this morning. His head is beginning to ache with a heaviness that is not the ale he has only had the one, but something deeper, something pressing from inside. He goes home. He tells his wife he is tired. He lies down. In the morning he cannot rise. Listen to the city waking up around him. The bells of St. Marylebone strike the hour 6 strokes, slow and resonant, rolling across the rooftops and down into the lanes. The bakers have been up since before the dark lifted, and already the smell of bread is threading through the air, warm and real, the most ordinary and comforting smell in the world. A cart horse clops slowly down the cobbled street outside, pulling a load of early market goods, and the driver makes a low sound to it, a sound that is barely even language, just a tone that means steady, steady, we are nearly there. Somewhere a dog is barking. Somewhere a child is being called in from wherever she has wandered. This is the city waking up. It does it every morning the same way. It has done it for centuries. It will do it long after all the people alive right now are gone. The bells will still ring. The bakers will still wake in the dark. The carts will still move through the early morning lanes with their indifferent loads. This morning is exactly like every other morning, except that Thomas cannot rise. And in a house 2 streets away, a woman named Marjorie is pressing her fingers to the swelling at her own armpit, frowning, not yet frightened, only puzzled. She was well yesterday. She is sure she was well yesterday. The swelling is the size of an egg, now hot and hard and wrong in a way that she cannot put words to, only feel. She goes to her work anyway. She is a laundress. She cannot afford not to. Let your body rest. Let the morning sounds settle around you, the bells, the horse, the bread smell, the dog in the distance. These are the sounds of a city that doesn't know yet. There is something almost unbearably tender in that. The ordinary persistence of it. The way life keeps doing its small and necessary things even as something immense is quietly taking shape around it. Notice how heavy your legs feel. How your breath has slowed. You are very far away from all of this, and very safe. By the end of the first week, there are 7 people in different parts of the city, no obvious connection between them, no single street or parish to point to, nothing that any physician or alderman would call a pattern yet. One is a child, a boy of perhaps 8 years old, who was running and shouting in the lane on Monday and is lying very still and very hot by Friday, his mother pressing wet cloths to his forehead in the dimness of their one-room home, his small face flushed in a way that frightens her every time she looks at it. One is an elderly wool merchant, who has lived long enough to have seen other sicknesses come through the city, and who thinks, at first, that this is one of those something that will take the weakest and spare the rest. He is the sort of man who has always believed that things which have happened before will happen again in the same way, that the world is orderly beneath its surface disorder. He believes this right up until the moment he cannot believe anything at all. The swellings are what they all have in common, though nobody knows this yet, because the 7 are strangers to one another, distributed across the city like the first drops of a rain that has not yet decided to fall. The swellings are dark. They swell at the neck, at the armpit, at the groin, the places where the body's channels meet, as if something is trying to push through and cannot. They are exquisitely painful to the touch. They smell, when they ripen, of something sweet and wrong, the same smell that drifted faintly through the air near the river 3 days ago, which nobody noticed, which everyone has already forgotten. The physicians, when called, are puzzled. They press their fingers to the swellings and frown. They feel the fever. They make the careful, considered expressions that physicians in every age have made when confronted with something they do not understand, but cannot admit to not understanding. They prescribe bloodletting, In some cases, they prescribe poultices of fig and onion. They prescribe rest and warm broth and prayer. They go home and wash their hands. They do not yet know that this means nothing. In the priory of St. Bartholomew, on the western edge of the city, a monk named Brother Edmund is writing in his chronicle by candlelight. He writes carefully, in the small neat Latin that he was taught as a boy, recording the business of the day the visitors received, the prayers said, the weather, the price of grain. He writes that a man was brought to the priory infirmary this afternoon with a great swelling of the throat and a terrible fever, and that the man was raving when they brought him in, speaking in fragments that Brother Edmund could not follow, something about a ship, something about the water, something about being very cold. He writes that the infirmarian, Brother Paul, has seen something like this before. He pauses here. He dips his pen again. He writes, Brother Paul will not say where. He grows pale when I press him. He has asked that we pray. And then Brother Edmund closes his chronicle, and he sits for a moment in the quiet of the scriptorium, listening to the candle, which makes no sound at all, and looking at the dark beyond the window, which gives nothing away. He prays. He does not know what he is praying against yet. He only knows the shape of the thing, the unease of it, the way Brother Paul went pale, the way the man on the infirmary bed was shaking even in the heat of his fever, shaking as though something inside him had come loose. He blows out his candle. He goes to bed. Outside, the city has settled into its night. The last of the market sounds have faded. The taverns are quieting. The fires are being banked for morning, one by one, and the thin smoke rises from the chimneys into the dark air and disperses and is gone. The river keeps its own counsel, as it always does, carrying everything and giving nothing back. Somewhere in the city, Thomas is sleeping a sleep that is no longer restful, his body working hard at something it does not have the tools for, fighting in the dark the way the butter fights when it has no other option, when all it can do is keep going and hope that the morning brings something different. The morning will not bring something different, but he does not know that yet, and so he sleeps. There are perhaps a dozen men in London who call themselves physicians in this year of 1348. They are learned men, genuinely so, by the standards of their age. They have spent years in the great universities of Europe, at Oxford or Bologna or Montpellier, sitting in cold lecture halls and listening to the words of Galen and Hippocrates read aloud in Latin, copying those words into their own books, turning them over in their minds the way jewelers turn stones, looking for the facet that catches the light. They believe in the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, and in the delicate balance between them that constitutes health, and in the disruptions of that balance that constitute disease. They believe that the stars have influence. They believe that bad air, miasma, they call it, from the Greek, can carry illness from one place to another, rising from the marshes and the middens and the open sores. They are not fools. They are working with the best tools they have. The tools are simply not enough. One of them is a man named Master William de Curie. He lives in a tall, narrow house off Cheapside, and his consulting room is on the ground floor, a serious room, lined with books and with the dried herbs that hang from the ceiling beams in bunches, filling the air with the ghost smells of lavender and wormwood and something sharper underneath that you cannot quite identify. He has a writing table and a chair for himself and a lower stool for his patients, and on the table there is always a candle, even in daylight, because the room does not get much sun. He is 53 years old. He has gray at his temples and ink on his right hand, and the particular slightly absent expression of a man who is always, at some level, thinking about something else. He has now seen 11 patients with the same presentation. 11, in the space of 2 weeks. He sits at his writing table in the evening, after the last of them has gone, and he looks at what he has written in his case notes, and he allows himself, for the first time, to feel something he does not normally permit in this room, unease. The swellings are unlike anything he was taught. He was taught about swellings. He knows the word bubo, from a Greek, which simply means swelling in the groin, though these are appearing at the neck and armpit too, which is irregular. He knows about putrefaction, about humoral imbalance, about the corrupted blood that must be let to restore the body to its proper equilibrium. He has let blood from 3 of the 11. 2 of them are dead. The third is alive but barely, and does not seem to be improving in any way that he can attribute to the treatment. He steeples his fingers. He looks at the candle. The flame does not move. The room is very still. He is thinking about miasma, about the bad air theory, which he has always believed and which suddenly seems insufficient, the way a coat that fitted last winter seems wrong when you put it on again and cannot say exactly what has changed, only that something has. The air in the house where the first man fell ill was no worse than a dozen other houses he visits regularly. There was nothing to distinguish it. No marsh nearby, no particularly foul refuse heap, no reason he can identify for that house to be the one where illness began. And yet the illness began somewhere. He picks up his pen. He writes. The number increases. The swellings are consistent in their presentation, but not in their location. The fever is extreme. The smell. He stops. He puts the pen down. He cannot write about the smell. Let your breathing slow now. Feel the weight of your eyelids. Feel the way the bed holds you, that reliable, gentle pressure from beneath that you almost never notice, that is simply always there, the world holding you up without being asked to. This is what most of the physicians of London are doing tonight, in their various serious rooms with their various candles, sitting, thinking, feeling the edges of what they know and finding those edges closer than they expected. This is not stupidity. This is the honest experience of confronting something new, which is one of the most frightening things a mind can do, not because new things are inherently dangerous, but because they reveal, suddenly, how much of what felt like solid ground was actually something else. Habit, assumption, the accumulated comfort of knowing that what happened before will happen again in the same way. The physicians of London are discovering that the ground is not solid. They are sitting with that knowledge in their quiet rooms. And in the houses and the back lanes and the parishes spreading out from the river, the people who are sick are getting sicker, and the people who are not sick yet are going about their days with the ordinary determined purposefulness of people who have not yet been asked to understand anything new. At the Guildhall, a meeting has been called. It is attended by aldermen and physicians and representatives of the church, sitting around a long table with a fire at one end that is not quite large enough for the size of the room. They are speaking carefully, in the measured tones of men who are aware that what they say will be repeated. They are discussing the illness. They are using words like pestilence and miasma and God's will, which is not a medical term, but appears in these conversations with increasing frequency, as it tends to do when the medical terms begin to run out. One of the aldermen asks how many are dead. There is a pause. 19, says someone. Another pause. That they know of. Someone else adds. The fire shifts in the grate. Someone coughs. Outside the tall narrow windows of the Guildhall, the city goes about its afternoon, the carts, the voices, the bells, the river, all of it carrying on as it always has, patient and indifferent to what is being said inside this room. The aldermen discuss closing the ports. They discuss it for a long time. They do not close the ports. The ports are how London eats. Master William de Curie visits a new patient the following morning. She is a woman of middling age who lives in a decent house near the Walbrook, the small river that runs through the city from north to south before joining the Thames. Her husband has sent for him with some urgency. Has sent, de Curie notices, one of the servants rather than coming himself, which tells him something about the fee already in that household. He goes upstairs. The room is dim, the shutters half closed. There is a smell here. He has learned now to expect it, though he still cannot fully prepare himself for it. That smell which has no name in any of his books, sweet and hot and deep, like fruit left too long in a warm place, like something biological running ahead of itself. The woman is on the bed. She is not old, perhaps 35, and she has the look of someone who was, very recently, in good health. Her face retains the structure of health. But the fever has her now, and the swelling at her neck has darkened to a purple-black bruise that spreads across the skin in a way that makes him think, involuntarily and against his better medical judgment, of a storm moving across the sky. She looks at him. He sees, in her eyes, that she already knows. She does not ask him if she will recover. She asks him if it will hurt much more than it does already. He tells her, and this is perhaps the most honest and most human thing he has done in his career, that he does not know. He tells her that he will do what he can. He tells her that he will come back tomorrow. He sits beside her for a while. He holds her wrist, not to take her pulse, though he does that too, but because it is something to do with his hands, and because she seems to find it steadying, the warmth of another person's hand, the ordinary proof of another body alive and present in the room. Outside, the Walbrook moves in its channel beneath the street, down toward the Thames, carrying with it everything the city puts into it, heading for the greater river, and from there to the sea. Close your eyes a little further. Let the images soften. Let the candles and the serious rooms and the careful, frightened men with their books fade gently into the background, into something warm and dark and distant. What remains is simpler than all of that. A hand holding a wrist. The proof of another person, alive and present. The warmth of it. That is what remains when everything else, the theories, the treatments, the careful Latin words, when all of that turns out to be not quite enough. What remains is the oldest thing. Presence. Warmth. The willingness to stay in a room with someone and hold still. The city is full of people doing exactly this tonight, sitting with the sick, holding hands, pressing cool cloths to foreheads, staying when every instinct says to go. This is also what London is. Not just the rats and the mud and the smell. Not just the fear moving through the lanes. Also this, the staying, the hand on the wrist, the willingness to sit in a dim room and be present for as long as presence is needed. November has come to London. The cold is no longer a suggestion. It has settled into the city with the full authority of winter, pressing down on the rooftops, finding every gap in every wall, turning the mud in the lanes to something harder and less forgiving underfoot. The Thames runs putrid beneath skies that have not fully brightened in days, and the light that gets through is the thin, watery kind that illuminates without warming, that shows you everything clearly and makes none of it look beautiful. The bells are ringing more often now. Not the regular bells, the hour bells, the prayer bells, the market bells that have always marked the rhythm of the city's days. Those still ring too. But underneath them, woven through them like a second voice in a song you thought you knew, there are the death bells, the slow, single tolling from St. Bride's and St. Dunstan's and All Hallows and a dozen other parish churches, rung each time a parishioner dies. The one bell struck and struck and struck until the sound is less like music and more like something dripping. The people of London have grown very good at not hearing these bells. This is what people do. They learn not to hear the things that, if they truly listened, would make it impossible to go on with the day. The bells become part of the background of the city, like the river and the wind, like the sound of the carts on the cobbles. You absorb them. You walk through them. You keep moving. But some people are not keeping moving. Some people are packing. In the large house on Lombard Street, one of the finest streets in the city, where the Italian banking families have their London offices, and where the houses are built of stone rather than timber, and have proper glazed windows and servants who wear livery, a household is preparing to leave. The family is that of a wool merchant, a prosperous man named Richard Blackwood, who has made enough money in 30 years of trade to own 3 houses and to send his eldest son to study law in Oxford, and who has enough connections in the county of Kent to have a second property there, a manor house a day's ride from the city, with clean air and open land and none of the close-packed density that is now beginning to feel, in London, less like the texture of prosperity and more like a trap. The servants have been packing since before dawn. They carry chests down the stairs, heavy oak chests banded with iron, containing the household linens and the silver plate and the account books and the good wool clothing and the other objects that constitute a wealthy life made portable. They carry them through the front door and load them onto the carts that stand waiting in the street, stamping in the cold, breathing small clouds of vapor into the November air. The family will follow at midday. Richard Blackwood stands in the doorway of his house and watches his life being loaded onto carts and tries to decide whether he is making the right decision. He is the sort of man who has always been able to decide things. It is why he has prospered, why the trading networks that sustain him bend toward him rather than away. But this morning the decision keeps shifting in his hands, turning over, showing him first one face and then another. He is leaving because he is afraid. He knows this. He will not say it, not to his wife, not to his sons, not to the servants who are watching him from the corners of their eyes for any sign of how to feel about all of this, but he knows it. He has sat with the fear for 2 weeks now, since the first of his neighbors was carried out on a board, and he has watched the death bells spread from St. Mary Woolnoth to St. Edmund King and then to St. Clement Eastcheap, and each time a new bell joins the toll he has done the same calculation, and each time the calculation comes out the same way. He is leaving. The carts move through the city in the pale morning light. And they are not alone. All along the widest streets Cheapside, the road that leads to Aldersgate, the lanes that funnel toward London Bridge, there are others. Other carts, other horses, other households in the process of becoming portable. Some of them are large and well-appointed like Richard Blackwood's, with matched horses and properly packed chests and servants who know what they are doing. Others are smaller, a single cart, a man and his wife and their children sitting on top of whatever they've managed to gather. The children looking out at the city, they're leaving with the particular wide-eyed attentiveness of children who understand that something important is happening even if they cannot say what. They move toward the gates. They pass through. They don't look back, most of them. And those who remain stand in the streets and watch them go. Agnes, from Grace Church Street, the woman we found mending by firelight on the first night, the woman with her husband and her daughter and her warm room, Agnes, is standing outside her door with her arms crossed against the cold, watching a cart go by. It is piled high with furniture, badly loaded, a chair visible on the very top with its legs pointing at the sky, as if in protest. She watches it pass. She goes back inside. She cannot leave. There is nowhere to go and no money to go there with, and no horse and no cart, and no property in Kent or anywhere else. Her husband's work is in the city. The tannery where he is employed is in the city. Everything they eat and everything that keeps them warm through winter comes from the work they do here, in these streets, in this city. And if they leave that, they leave everything. So they stay, as most people stay. As the great majority of London's 80,000 souls stay, because they are not wool merchants with second properties and packed chests of silver plate, but bakers and tanners and laundresses and dockers and fishwives and apprentices and monks and children, all of them rooted here by the ordinary, immovable fact of their lives, which require this place to be what they are. The city belongs to them now, more than it ever did. And the city is also, increasingly, frightening. Let yourself settle deeper into the dark. Feel the warmth around you, your own warmth, the warmth you generate without thinking, the way the body is always quietly working to keep itself at the right temperature, the way it tends to you even while you sleep. This is something the body knows how to do. Trust it. The lanes are quieter now. Not silent, they will not be silent for months yet. The city is too alive for that, but thinner. There are gaps in the market stalls where there were no gaps before. There are houses with their shutters closed at hours when shutters are normally open. There are streets where you might walk for a full minute without passing another person, which in this city, in this century, is a thing that has simply never happened before. The absence is its own kind of presence. You feel it the way you feel a missing tooth with your tongue returning to it, unable to leave it alone, the gap where something solid used to be. And in the houses where the sick are lying, the world has narrowed to a single room. Thomas the docker is still alive. Just. His wife Ellen sits beside him in the way that she has sat beside him for most of the past 2 weeks in the chair. She has moved from the other side of the room to beside the bed, close enough to touch him, close enough to press the wet cloth to his forehead when the fever rises again, which it does with a regularity that she has stopped finding surprising and started simply responding to, the way you respond to the weather. The cloth. The water. His hand, which she holds when he is lucid enough to know she's there. He has lucid moments. In one of them, 3 days ago, he asked her to send for his brother in Southwark. She sent. The brother has not come. This is also something that is happening across the city, the small failures of connection, the messages sent and not answered, the visits promised and not made, the gradual and terrible discovery that fear can be stronger than love, or at least faster. Ellen does not let herself think about the brother. She dips the cloth in the water. She folds it. She presses it to her husband's forehead. He makes a small sound, not a word, just a sound, but a sound that means something, that she has spent 20 years learning to read, and what it means is simply, I know you're here. She stays. In the street below, a dog is walking alone. It is a medium-sized brown dog of no particular breed, the kind of dog that is simply part of the city, owned by everyone and no one, fed from scraps and doorsteps and the edges of the market. It walks with the unhurried purposefulness of a creature that has somewhere to be and is in no great hurry to get there. It stops to smell something at the base of a wall. It moves on. The bell of St. Clement East Cheap begins its slow toll. 1. Pause. 1. Pause. The dog does not look up. The sound spreads across the rooftops and dissipates into the gray November air. One more layer of sound added to all the other layers: the river, the carts, the wind, the smaller sounds of the city living and dying and going on. The dog turns a corner and is gone. Master William de Curie is writing letters. He has been corresponding, for the past week, with a physician in Florence and another in Paris, two men he studied alongside at Montpellier 20 years ago, with whom he has maintained a correspondence of the kind that learned men maintain across distances, careful letters about cases and treatments and the slow progress of ideas, sent on the trading ships and arriving weeks later, smelling of the sea. The replies, when they come, are not reassuring. The man in Florence writes of something that began in the east in the ports of the Black Sea, among the Mongol territories, carried west by the trading ships along the same routes that carry silk and spice and all the other things that flow from those distant markets into the harbors of Europe. He writes of cities in Italy where the death toll is, and here his Latin, usually so precise, becomes strained, as though the numbers are too large to fit inside the careful structure of the language, where the death toll is vast, incomprehensible, where the graves cannot be dug fast enough and the physicians cannot be everywhere at once, and the people are dying in the streets and in their houses and in the churches where they have gone to pray for deliverance. De Curie reads this letter twice. Then he folds it very carefully and puts it in the drawer of his writing table and sits for a long time looking at the closed drawer. He does not take it out again. Some knowledge, once held, cannot be put down. It can only be carried. He picks up his pen. He writes to the alderman of the city, in careful measured language that gives no indication of what is in his drawer, recommending certain precautions, the removal of refuse from the streets, the avoidance of large gatherings, the quarantine of the sick. He chooses his words with the precision of a man who knows that the wrong words, spoken too plainly, cause a different kind of harm. He seals the letter. He sends it. He goes to bed. Outside his window, the death bell of St. Marylebone is tolling. He has learned, like everyone else, not to hear it. December comes to the city like a closing hand. The sky is low and the color of old pewter, and the cold has moved past discomfort into something more fundamental, a cold that is simply the condition of the world now, that does not apologize and does not relent, that is present in every stone and every timber and every breath that rises and disappears in the frozen air. The Thames, near the banks, has begun to form thin shelves of ice that extend a little further each morning, pale and translucent at the edges, thickening toward gray. The death bells have stopped, not because fewer people are dying, because the bells cannot keep up. There is a field at East Smithfield, just outside the city walls, near the tower. It is not a pretty field. It never was. It was grazing land, mostly churned by animals and wet in winter, the kind of land that exists at the edges of cities because nobody has yet found better use for it. But a month ago, the Bishop of London acquired it. He acquired it quickly and quietly and without much public announcement, because what he needed it for was the kind of thing that does not benefit from public announcement. He needed it for graves. Not single graves, not the careful individual plots of the churchyards, each one dug to a proper depth, each one blessed and recorded and marked with whatever marker the family could afford. The churchyards are full. They were full within 2 weeks of the plague's arrival. The old ones that had been accumulating their layers of Londoners for centuries, the newer ones that had seemed so spacious when they were consecrated. They are full in the way that a cup is full when you keep pouring past the point of fullness, past the point of dignity, into something else. The field at East Smithfield is for something else. The grave diggers work in the cold. There are perhaps 20 of them, men hired at wages that have tripled since September, men who were doing other things a few months ago and are doing this now because the money is real and because someone has to, and because in a city where dying has become so common it has started to feel like weather. The psychological distance between this work and any other work has collapsed in ways that would have been unthinkable in the summer. They dig in long trenches. The trenches are 6 feet deep and wide enough for 3 bodies laid side by side, and they run the length of the field in parallel lines, each one begun when the last one is full, which happens faster now than it did in the first weeks, which happened faster than anyone anticipated, the arithmetic of it always arriving ahead of the preparations made for it. The foreman of the gravediggers is a man named Hugh. He is 40 years old and broad and has the quality of stillness that some people develop when their work requires them to be present for things that other people look away from. He does not look away. This is not because he does not feel. He feels considerably in the evenings when the work is done and he is sitting by his fire with the ale that he has taken to drinking more than he used to. It is because looking away is not a thing that the work allows. He has been keeping a rough count. He does not write it down. He keeps it in his head, the way his father kept the accounts of his mill, a running total, updated each day, held somewhere in the mind below the level of active thought, so that it is always there when you reach for it without requiring you to actively look at it. The count is large. He does not say it aloud to anyone. Let your body be still. Feel the length of it from the top of your head to the soles of your feet, the whole long architecture of you, breathing, warm, held by the dark. There is something very old about lying still in the dark, something that goes back further than any of this, further than London, further than 1348, further than history. Just the body horizontal, the breath slow, the eyes closed. Every human being who has ever lived has done this. Every one of them found, eventually, The same surrender, the same loosening of the grip, the same sinking into whatever waits below waking. Let yourself sink. Brother Edmund is still writing in his chronicle. His entries have changed in character over the past 2 months. They were careful and precise, in the beginning the measured record of a man who believed in the orderliness of information, who thought that if you wrote things down accurately enough you preserved some control over them. Now the entries are shorter. The Latin is less ornate. He crosses out more words than he used to, as though the sentences keep starting in the wrong direction and having to be abandoned and begun again. He writes, "The number of dead in our parish this week cannot be given with certainty." He crosses that out. He writes, "Brother Paul died on Thursday. He was the first of us. We prayed for him through the night." He does not cross that out. He sits for a while. He writes, "The question I cannot stop returning to is not why God has permitted this. I understand, or I tell myself I understand, the theological shape of that answer, and I will not write it here because I no longer fully believe it, and I will not write things I do not believe in this book. The question I cannot stop returning to is simpler. It is, what do you do with a number this large? A number that keeps growing. A number for which we have no adequate ceremony." He stops. He looks at what he has written. This is, he thinks, perhaps the most honest thing he has ever put in this book. He does not cross it out. He closes the chronicle and sits in the dark scriptorium for a long time, listening to the silence of the priory around him, which is a different silence than it was 3 months ago, thinner, more aware of itself, the silence of a place with fewer people in it. Then he picks up his candle and goes to prayers. He goes to prayers every night. He will go every night that he is able, not because the prayers have answered anything, or because he expects them to, but because the going itself is something, the act of walking to the same place at the same time with the same words in the same cold air, because the ritual is a kind of rope and he is holding on to it, hand over hand, the way you hold on to something in the dark when you cannot see where it leads, but you have decided, simply, to keep holding. Agnes's husband is sick. She noticed it 3 days ago, the warmth of him in the night, the way he woke coughing at an hour when he never coughs, the way he reached for her in the dark with a hand that was too hot. She lay very still when he reached for her. She held his hand. She listened to his breathing. In the morning she looked at his neck. The swelling is small yet, the size of a walnut, hidden under the angle of his jaw, where she had to press her fingers to find it. He winced. He said it was nothing. He went to the tannery. She stood in the doorway after he left and looked at the lane and felt something moving through her that she did not have a name for, not quite fear, which implies uncertainty, but something more final, more like recognition, the way you recognize the shape of something in low light before you can see it clearly. She went inside. She has a daughter to think about. Her name is Joan. She is 11 years old, dark-haired and practical in the way of children who have been brought up with not quite enough of everything, not hungry, not cold, but always aware of the margins, always slightly more alert to the difference between what is fine and what is not fine than children who have never needed to be. She is at her mother's elbow now, in the kitchen, stirring the pot, not asking the questions that Agnes can see forming behind her eyes. Agnes looks at her daughter. Joan looks at her mother. Neither of them says the thing that both of them knows. This is also what love is. Sometimes the agreement to not say the thing, to keep the ordinary shape of the day intact, to stir the pot and set the bowls and sit across from each other in the firelight as though the firelight will be there tomorrow and the day after, as though the warmth of this room is a thing that can be maintained by simply refusing to imagine it otherwise. Outside the city walls, at East Smithfield, Hugh and his men have stopped for the night. The torches are planted at the corners of the trench, burning in the cold air with the small, concentrated urgency of things that are working hard against the dark. The men are eating bread, mostly, and something warm from a pot that one of them has brought sitting at the edge of the field, away from the trench, not looking at it. One of the younger men, barely 20, new to this work, is sitting slightly apart from the others. He is looking at the city, at the dim glow of it visible over the walls, the accumulated light of 10,000 fires pressing softly up against the bottom of the clouds. He has been thinking about something all day, about the people in the trench behind him, about the fact that each of them was, very recently, someone's Agnes, someone's Thomas, someone's brother Paul. That each of them woke up on some morning not long ago in a room they knew, with a fire to bank and a day to begin, and whatever small and ordinary concerns constitute a life, and that none of that is visible now, none of it legible in what they have become. He does not say any of this. He eats his bread. He looks at the city's glow against the clouds, warm, amber, alive, and he stays with it for a while. This proof that the city is still burning its fires, still moving and breathing and being itself, still full of people in warm rooms who have not yet become what the people behind him have become. The proof of it is enough. He finishes his bread. He goes to sleep on the cold ground, wrapped in his coat, closer to the others than he was before, and the torches bind down slowly, and the field is quiet, and the city glows on the horizon like something that intends, despite everything, to persist. There is a sound that London is missing. It is not the bells, though the bells are strange now too. It is not the market voices or the river or the carts on the cobbles. It is something smaller than all of those, something that runs beneath the city's daily noise the way a thread runs through cloth, so present that you only notice it by its absence, the way the cloth looks different, wrung, when the thread is gone. It is the sound of children. London is a city full of children, ordinarily. They are everywhere, in the lanes, in the markets, running messages and errands, sitting on doorsteps, playing the rough, unsupervised games of children who have the whole city for a playground and no particular adult supervision to interrupt them. Their noise is constant and unremarkable and entirely alive, the shouting and the laughing and the crying and the particular high-pitched intensity of children in argument, which sounds serious and is serious, because everything is serious when you are 7 years old and the argument is about something that matters. That sound has thinned. The lanes are not empty of children, but there are fewer of them, and the ones who remain are quieter, as though they have absorbed something from the adults around them, some new gravity, some awareness that the usual rules about noise and running and taking up space have been quietly suspended in favor of something else, something they can feel but not name. They play more carefully now. They stay closer to the doors. In the parish school attached to St. Giles without Cripplegate, a priest named Father Aldrich teaches the sons of tradesmen their letters. He has been teaching here for 11 years. He knows these boys the way teachers know their students, not intimately, not as you know your own children, but in the particular sideways way of the classroom, where you see a person in one specific light for hours each day and come to know the shape of their attention, the quality of their boredom, the expression they make when something clicks into place. There are 14 boys enrolled in his school. This morning, 5 of them came. He stood at the front of the room and looked at the 5 small faces looking back at him and felt something that he is still, hours later, unable to properly categorize. Not grief exactly. Grief has a direction, a specific object. This was more like what you feel when you reach for something in the dark, and your hand finds empty air where there should be solid ground. He taught the lesson anyway. He taught it to the 5 boys who were there, going through the letters, the words, the slow construction of meaning for marks on a page, the same way he has taught it every morning for 11 years. Because the lesson was what he had, and the 5 boys were there, and the work was the work regardless of how many pairs of eyes were looking at him. Afterward, one of the boys, a small, serious child named William, who is perhaps 8 years old and has the kind of face that looks like it is always slightly puzzling something out stayed behind while the others left. He stood in front of Father Aldrich's table. He said, "Where's Robert?" Robert was his friend. Robert sat beside him every day. Robert had a gap where his front teeth were falling out and being replaced by the larger teeth of growing up, and he made a small whistling sound when he said certain words, which William had always found funny, the comfortable funny of something that belongs to your ordinary life. Father Aldrich looked at William. He said, "Robert is unwell. He is resting at home." William looked at him for a long moment with those puzzling eyes. He said, "My mother told me not to ask about people who are unwell." Father Aldrich said, "Your mother is wise." William thought about this. Then he picked up his bag and left. Father Aldrich sat down heavily in his chair and looked at the empty room and did not move for a long time. Let your breathing slow a little more. In and out. The room around you is dark and warm and yours. Nothing in it is strange or wrong. Everything is exactly where it should be. You are exactly where you should be. There is nothing to work out, nothing to puzzle through. Just the dark and the warmth and the slow, easy tide of your own breath. Agnes's daughter Joan has a friend named Cecily. Cecily lives 3 lanes away in a house that backs onto the Walbrook. And she and Joan have been friends since they were small enough that neither of them can remember a time before the friendship. It is simply one of the fixed facts of their lives, like the location of the market or the sound of the bells, something that has always been there and is therefore not thought about but simply inhabited. They meet most days, or they did. They would find each other in the lanes after their morning tasks were done, and they would walk together and talk in the inexhaustible way of girls that age, about everything and nothing, a continuous thread of observation and opinion and small news that constitutes the daily life of a friendship. This week they have not met. Joan asked her mother if she could go to Cecily's. Agnes said not today. Joan did not ask why. She has stopped asking why. About certain things. She is 11 years old, and she is old enough to understand that some answers are not given because they are too heavy to be handed to a child to carry, and she is young enough that she has not yet learned to resent this, to push back against it. She only understands it as a shape, the shape of the thing her mother is not saying, which she traces with her mind the way her tongue traces the gap of a missing tooth. Not today. She sits by the fire and does the mending that her mother has given her mother, who is spending more and more time in the back room with her father, whose cough has deepened and whose fever comes and goes like the tide, present and then retreating and then present again, never fully leaving. She mends carefully. She makes small, even stitches the way her mother taught her. Outside, the lane is quiet. There is a rhyme the children of London sing. They have been singing it for as long as anyone can remember longer, probably, since rhymes like this move through children's mouths the way water moves through channels, finding their own paths, wearing the words smooth with repetition until nobody can remember who made them or why. The children sing it while they play their games, the ones with clapping and the ones with running and the ones that are simply the performance of the song itself, the pleasure of the words in the mouth, the rhythm of it. The rhyme goes, "Ring around the roses." But we will not dwell on the rhyme tonight, because the children who are singing it do not know what it means. They have never known what it means, and this is how it should be. This is the mercy of it. They are singing it because the rhythm is good and because their friends are singing it and because children have always needed rhythms, have always needed the held shape of a song to put the world into when the world is too large and too strange to hold any other way. The song is a way of holding. That is what all songs are, at their root. That is what this story is. On Ironmonger Lane, in a house that has been quiet for a week, a boy of 12 named Thomas, not the docker, a different Thomas. The city is full of Thomases, is sitting with his younger sister. Her name is Alice. She is 6 years old. She has been sick for 4 days and is sleeping now. Finally, after 2 days when she would not sleep, when the fever kept her in that restless half-waking state that is worse than either sleeping or waking, where she cried without knowing why she was crying and reached for things that weren't there. She is sleeping now. Her brother is watching her sleep. He is 12 years old, which is old enough to understand what the swelling at her neck means, what the fever means, what the particular sweet wrongness of the air in this room means. He is 12, which is to say he is balanced exactly on the edge between childhood and something else, young enough to be frightened in the open, uncomplicated way of children and old enough to understand that the fright will not help and must therefore be held somewhere that does not interfere with what needs to be done. What needs to be done, right now, is this: to sit here and watch her sleep. Their mother is ill too, in the next room. Their father left a week ago, not like Richard Blackwood, not with carts and silver plate, but simply walked out one morning and did not come back, which is a different kind of leaving, a harder one to make sense of, one that Thomas has put in the same mental place where he puts all the things he does not have the equipment to make sense of right now. He watches his sister sleep. Alice's face, in sleep, is completely peaceful. The fever has eased, not broken, but eased, and her face has the quality of a face that is simply resting, simply being a face, the work of consciousness suspended for a little while. She looks like herself, more like herself, in this moment, than she has looked in 4 days. Thomas watches her. He has the urge to put his hand on her forehead the way he has seen his mother do, to feel whether the fever has gone down, to do something measurable. But she is sleeping. She is finally sleeping. He will not wake her. He sits on his hands. He watches her breathe. This is the city tonight. Not only the mass graves and the stop bells and the physicians with their insufficient books. Also this, a 12-year-old boy, sitting on his hands, watching his sister breathe. The watching is everything. The watching is the whole of what he has to give, and he gives it completely, with the total unself-conscious concentration of someone who has nothing else to do and nowhere else to be and has understood, without being told, that presence is not nothing. Presence is not nothing. Remember that, as you drift. Whatever it is you have given to the people you love simply by being there in the room, awake, attending, your face turned toward them in the dark, that is not nothing. It is perhaps the most ancient thing one person can give another. Older than language, older than medicine, older than any of the things we have built to stand between us and the darkness. The watching, the staying, the hand that does not move away. Joan, by the fire, makes her small even stitches. Brother Edmund walks to prayers in the cold dark of the priory. Hugh sleeps on the ground at East Smithfield, wrapped in his coat. Master William de Curie sits at his writing table, and does not open the drawer where the letter from Florence is folded. And Thomas, on Ironmonger Lane, watches his sister's chest rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall, that oldest proof, that simplest miracle, the body going on. She breathes. He watches. The night holds them both. It is a Thursday morning in January, the coldest month. The month when winter stops pretending it will relent and simply becomes the truth of things: the iron ground, the white sky, the Thames locked along its edges in gray ice that extends further each morning, the water at the center still moving, black and slow and indifferent. London has been living with the plague for 3 months now. 3 months is long enough for the extraordinary to become ordinary, long enough for the death bells and the empty market stalls and the covered carts that move through the streets at dusk to become simply the furniture of the day, the background against which life continues, because life has no other option but to continue. The people who are still here have developed a kind of armor made of routine. You wake. You bank the fire. You go out if you must and come home as quickly as you can. You eat. You sleep. You wake again. The routine is the armor, and the armor mostly holds. And then, on this particular Thursday morning, Something comes through the gate at Aldgate that has not been seen in London before. They number perhaps 100. They walk in a procession, not the orderly procession of a church ceremony, with its candles and its measured pace and its sense of occasion contained within familiar forms, but something rawer and more purposeful, a procession that has been walking for a very long time and has the quality of something that has gone past exhaustion into a kind of fierce, rhythmic endurance. They wear white robes, dark with the stains of travel and weather. Many of them are barefoot on the frozen ground, though they do not appear to feel the cold, or if they feel it, they have placed the feeling somewhere outside their attention, somewhere it cannot reach the place they are moving from. Their heads are bowed. Their lips move continuously in what might be prayer or might be something older than prayer, some repetition that has gone past meaning into pure sound, pure rhythm. The words worn smooth by weeks of use into something that is no longer language but only the shape of language, the ghost of it. They carry leather straps, knotted at the ends. And as they walk, they use them. The people of London come to their windows and their doorways. They watch from a careful distance, not hostile, not welcoming, only watching with the particular expression that people wear when they are witnessing something they cannot quite categorize, something that doesn't fit into any of the spaces the mind has prepared for incoming experience. Agnes is at her window. She watches the procession move along the lane below, the white robes, the bowed heads, the rhythm of it, the sound of it, which is low and continuous and unlike any sound she has heard before, part chant, part breath, part something she cannot name, the 100 voices blending into a single voice that is less a voice than a frequency, a vibration that she feels in her chest as much as hears with her ears. She watches them pass. She does not open the door. Her husband is worse today. He has been worse since Christmas, the illness deepening in him slowly but with a terrible consistency, like water finding its way through stone. The swelling at his neck has darkened. He sleeps most of the day now, and when he wakes his eyes take a moment to find her, to locate her in the room, as though she is a thing he has to travel some distance to reach. She watches the procession. She thinks these people have also lost something. She thinks, perhaps this is what it looks like when grief becomes too large for the inside of a person, when it has to come out and become visible, has to be worn on the body and shown to the world, because there is no other container for it big enough. She does not judge them. She closes the shutter. She goes back to her husband. Let the sound of the procession fade. Let it become distant, one more sound in the deep background of the night, no louder than the river, no sharper than the wind. It is moving away now, down another street, around another corner, becoming something heard only faintly, and then not at all. You don't need to follow it. You are warm. You are still. The dark is the same dark it has always been. Brother Edmund watches from the Priory gate. He watches with the careful theological attention of a man who has studied the question of suffering for 30 years, and is now being asked to watch it performed in the street. He knows about the flagellant movement. It has been moving through Europe ahead of the plague, or alongside it, a wave of public penance that began in Germany and Hungary and has been spreading westward through France and now here, into England, into London, the grief of a continent finding this particular shape. He understands the theology of it, the idea that suffering, voluntarily undertaken, might intercede with a God who has unleashed this upon the world, that the body's pain, made public and collective, might constitute a kind of argument, a petition, a negotiation with the divine. He understands it. He watches. He does not feel what he expected to feel, which was a kind of scholarly distance, the composure of a man who has the correct framework for this and can therefore hold it at arm's length and examine it. What he feels instead is something less composed and more honest, a recognition that moves through him before he can stop it, a sense of, yes, I understand why this. Yes, I can see the logic of needing the pain to be outside of you, visible, shed, witnessed. He has been holding his own grief inside for 3 months. He has been walking to prayers and writing in his chronicle and keeping the forms of his vocation intact, because the forms are the rope and he is holding onto the rope. But the grief is large. The grief is larger than the forms can hold. Some days. Some mornings he wakes in the dark priory and feels it pressing against the inside of his chest like something trying to get out. And he takes a breath and he walks to prayers and he holds onto the rope, and the forms contain it. Barely. He watches the procession pass. He does not join it. He goes back inside. He sits in the scriptorium for a long time without opening his chronicle. Then he opens it. He writes, "They came through Aldgate this morning. 100, perhaps more. I watched them from the gate. I will not describe what I saw in detail because the detail is not the point. The point is that they are here, which means this grief has been walking for a very long time across a very large distance, and it has arrived at our door, and it is wearing white, and it will not be still." He pauses. He writes, "I prayed for them. I prayed that whatever they are looking for, they find it. I prayed that the finding of it looks nothing like what they are doing to themselves. I prayed, and then I sat with the doubt that the prayer would reach anywhere at all, and I let the doubt be there, because I have decided that doubt which is honest is worth more than certainty which is not." He closes the chronicle. He puts his head down on his arms. He does not sleep. He is not tired in the body, only in some other place. Some place that does not have a name in his theology or anyone else's, a place that is simply one. He stays there for a while. The candle burns beside him. The priory is quiet around him. Somewhere outside, very faintly, the procession is still moving through the city. Its sound diminished to almost nothing, a murmur at the bottom of the air, a frequency more felt than heard. Then that too fades, and there is only the candle, and Brother Edmund's breathing, slow and even, his head on his arms, not sleeping but resting in the way that is available to him. Master William de Curie saw the procession from his window on Cheapside. He watched it with the diagnostician's eye, noting the state of the feet, the signs of long-term physical deprivation visible even at this distance, the glazed quality of the eyes in the faces he could see, the kind of dissociation he recognizes from patients in extreme fever or extreme pain, the mind stepping back from what the body is experiencing in order to continue functioning. He did not open his window. He thought about the question of whether what he was watching constituted, in any medical sense, harm. He thought about this for longer than he expected to. He thought about the people in his care, Thomas's wife Ellen, still sitting beside her husband who was diminishing by degrees, the woman by the Walbrook, who died 2 weeks ago, the 11 new cases he has taken on since then, each one presenting the same way, each one requiring from him the same combination of competence and honesty and presence that he has been summoning from some reserve he was not aware he had before all this began. He thought about what it would mean to walk in a procession, to be outside, to be moving, to have the grief be a physical thing, in the body, expressed through the body, shared with other bodies moving in the same direction. He has been sitting at his writing table for 3 months. He has been thinking, writing, visiting, doing the work of the work. He has not moved very much. He watches the last of the white figures disappear around the corner of the lane. He sits back down at his writing table. He picks up his pen. He does not write anything for a while. Then he writes, in the margin of his case notes, in a smaller hand than usual, almost as though he doesn't want it to take up too much space. They walked barefoot on the ice. They did not appear to feel it. I wonder sometimes what it would be like to feel nothing but the one thing. He looks at that for a moment. Then he turns the page. The procession has moved through the city and out the other side now, through the gate at Ludgate. heading west along the road that leads out of London into the open country. They will keep walking. They have been walking for months, and they will walk for months more. This 100 white-robed figures moving through the winter landscape of England with their grief and their theology and their leather straps and their continuous low chanting that sounds from a distance, from the right distance, almost like a lullaby. Not a comforting lullaby, but a lullaby, a thing sung to hold something that cannot otherwise be held, a rhythm imposed on experience that has no natural rhythm, a way of moving through the unbearable by putting one foot in front of the other and making a sound with your mouth and letting the sound be bigger than you are for a little while. This is also what humans do. In the face of the enormous and the terrible, they make sounds. They make rhythms. They walk in the direction of something, even when the something is unclear, even when the walking itself is the point. They hold what they can. They keep going. Dying is slowing, not stopped, not over. People are still falling ill, still lying in the dim rooms with the hot foreheads and the swellings and the particular smell that everyone in London now recognizes and no one can bring themselves to describe. The death bells are still ringing. Hugh and his men are still at East Smithfield, still digging in the cold ground, still eating their bread at the edge of the field in the torchlight. But the pace has changed. Something in the arithmetic of it has shifted, some ratio between the sick and the recovering that has begun, very quietly, to move in a different direction. The physicians feel it first, in the way physicians feel things in the day two of their rounds, in the cases that are resolving rather than progressing, in the patients who have come through the worst of it and are sitting up and asking for water and looking at their hands with the particular bewildered gratitude of people who did not expect to be looking at anything anymore. Master William de Curie has 5 patients recovering. He has not had 5 patients recovering simultaneously since October. He sits at his writing table on a Tuesday evening in February and looks at his case notes and allows himself carefully, with the caution of a man who has been surprised too many times in the wrong direction to trust good news easily, allows himself to notice that the numbers are moving differently. He does not celebrate. He does not tell anyone. He makes a small mark in the margin of his notes, a private notation that means nothing to anyone but him, and he closes the book, and he sits for a while in the quiet of his room with the candle burning and the night outside the window doing what the night does. He breathes. For the first time in months, the breathing feels like something other than maintenance. The ice on the Thames is retreating. It happens over the course of a week, the thin shelves at the edges pulling back each morning, the gray ice losing its solidity, the river reclaiming its surface in patches of dark water that spread and connect until the river is itself again, wide and gray and moving, carrying everything with it the way it always has. The lightermen are back on the water. They move their long flat boats through the February morning with the practiced ease of people resuming something interrupted, not tentatively, not as though testing whether the river will hold them, but with the full confidence of a relationship that has only been briefly suspended and is now simply continuing. They call to each other across the water in the shorthand of their trade, a language of signals and sounds that has nothing to do with the plague and everything to do with the river and the tides and the load and where it needs to go. The river does not care about what happened. This is not callousness. This is the river's nature. It moves, it carries, it reaches the sea and evaporates and falls again somewhere as rain and finds its way back to the river. It does not accumulate. It does not remember. It simply moves. There is something restoring about this, for the people who watch from the banks. The river moving is a promise of a kind, not a spoken promise, not a deliberate one, but the kind that is made simply by continuing to be what you are. The river says, the world is still doing what the world does. And on some mornings, in February, that is enough. Agnes's husband died on the 5th of February. She was there. Joan was there. He was not alone. The dying was not peaceful in the way that word is sometimes used, the gentle subsiding, the quiet slipping away that people imagine when they hope for a good death. It was hard work, the way most dying is, the body effortful even at the end, insisting on itself even when insisting no longer made any difference. But he was not alone, and Agnes held his hand through the hard parts, and at the end there was a single moment, before the last breath and after the second to last, when he looked at her with full recognition, full presence, as though he had come back from somewhere distant just for this, just to see her clearly one more time. That moment is hers. She does not speak of it. She carries it the way you carry the things that are too important for speech, not hidden, not suppressed, but held in a place that words cannot reach and therefore cannot diminish. She buries him in the churchyard of St. Mary Woolnoth. The grave digger is not Hugh as at East Smithfield, and this is a parish burial, a single grave, dug properly to the right depth by a man who is tired but who digs it carefully anyway, with the conscientious attention of someone who understands that this grave is for a specific person and deserves to be what it is. Agnes and Joan stand at the graveside. It is a cold gray morning. The ground is hard. The priest's breath makes small white clouds as he reads the words, the Latin words she has heard at funerals before, and which have always seemed to her less like language and more like a kind of music, a sound the human voice makes at the edge of what human voices can address, reaching towards something beyond its range. She listens to the words. She holds Joan's hand. Joan is very still. She has been very still for days, with the stillness of a child who is processing something too large for the usual channels and has gone quiet while the processing happens, somewhere underneath, somewhere that does not require her to be present or to speak or to know what she feels. She will know later. Children always know later, when the largeness has been reduced to something their hands can hold. For now she is still. Her mother holds her hand. The words end. The birds, somewhere in the bare winter trees of the churchyard, are making small sounds, not the full chorus of spring, not yet, but the tentative early sounds of birds who have noticed that something about the light is beginning to change, who are beginning, in their own wordless way, to prepare for something. Agnes hears them. She looks up. Above the bare branches, the sky is the pale gray-white of February. The sky that is not quite winter and not quite anything else. The sky that is the color of potential, of the hour before the thing that comes next. She looks at it for a long moment. Then she takes her daughter's hand more firmly, and they walk home through the quiet streets. Let your breathing be very slow now. So slow. In, and the long pause before out, and the long pause before in again. Your body knows the rhythm. It has always known. You don't need to teach it anything. Just let it do what it knows. Joan goes back to school. Father Aldrich is there when she arrives. He is always there. He has been there every morning without exception, a fact which Joan registers with the particular relief of a child who has needed, more than she knew, for something to be where it is supposed to be. There are 8 children in the school now. Not 14, that number is not coming back, and Father Aldrich has accepted this in the way he has accepted the other things that are not coming back, by finding the exact shape of each absence and holding it clearly, and then continuing. But 8. 8 is more than 5. The lesson begins. He reads to them from a Latin text a passage he has chosen with some care, something about the return of spring, about the world reasserting itself after difficulty, something that is true without being falsely consoling. He reads slowly, pausing to ask them what words mean, to ask them what they think the writer intended, to do the ordinary work of teaching, which is to take a mind that is closed and wait patiently beside it until it opens. William is there. He is in his usual seat, his serious, puzzling face attending to the lesson with the focused concentration he always brings. He has not asked about Robert again. He will not ask. Father Aldrich thinks not because he has forgotten, but because he has understood, in the way children understand things, sideways and completely, that Robert is not coming back, and that asking will not change this, and that the question, now, has no way useful to go. Instead, he is here. He is attending. He is learning the words. Brother Edmund's chronicle has changed again. The entries are longer now. The Latin is returning to its earlier precision, its careful architecture of subordinate clauses and qualified assertions. He is writing with the attention of a man who has found his way back to something after a long time away from it, not the same as before, never quite the same, but recognizably his own. He writes about the spring that is approaching, about the way the priory garden looks in February, the bare brown earth still hard but with something underneath it that he knows is there even if he cannot see it yet, something green and determined, something that has been waiting. He writes, I have been thinking about what we owe the dead. I do not mean in any formal theological sense. I know the formal answers, and I will say them when I must. I mean in the ordinary human sense. What the living owe to those who were here and are not now. I think the answer might be simple, to remember them specifically, not as a number, not as a lesson or warning or proof of anything, but as themselves. Thomas, who was a docker and had calloused hands. The woman by the Walbrook who asked me not whether she would live, but whether it would hurt. The 9 brothers of this priory who are no longer here. To hold the specific faces. To not let them become a generality. He pauses. He writes, this is, I think, what the chronicle is for. Not to explain, only to hold. He closes the book. He goes to the window. Outside, in the priory garden, a single bird is sitting on the bare branch of the apple tree, making its small tentative February sound into the pale morning air. He watches it for a long time. Hugh has been counting down. Not the dead. He keeps that number in the same internal place he has always kept it, unspoken, inaccessible, a thing he carries but does not look at directly. What he is counting now is different. He is counting the days since the pace changed, since the numbers began to move in the other direction. He is not ready to say it aloud. It feels dangerous to say aloud, the way it is dangerous to say of a healing wound that it is healing, in case the saying undoes something. But he is counting. 22 days now since the numbers turned. He eats his bread at the edge of the field. He looks at the city's glow. He counts. London is not healed. It will not be healed for a long time, not in any simple sense, not in the way a cut heals, neatly and without remainder. 1/3 of its people are gone. The gaps in the streets and the market stalls and the schoolrooms and the priories and the households are real gaps, the shape of real absences, and they will not be filled by anything except time and the slow work of living. And even then they will remain in the memory of the city, in the chronicle of Brother Edmund, in the shape of the place where Robert used to sit. But something is changing. The light is changing. Very slowly. The February light is still pale and thin and noncommittal, but it is lasting longer each day, a few minutes more each evening before the dark comes down, a few minutes earlier each morning before the sun lifts above the rooftops. The days are lengthening. The world is tilting, imperceptibly but certainly, in the direction of warmth. The birds have noticed. They are making their tentative sounds in the bare trees. The river is moving freely again, ice-free, carrying everything toward the sea. Agnes and Joan walk home from the churchyard through the quiet streets, their hands linked, their breath making small white clouds in the cold morning air. They walk without speaking. They walk in the way of 2 people who have been through something together and are now simply together, the something understood between them without needing to be named. They turn onto Gracechurch Street. Their house is there, where it has always been. The door is the same door. The step is the same step. Inside, the fire will need banking. The morning tasks are waiting. The ordinary requirements of the day will begin again, as they always begin, with the mild, implacable urgency of things that need to be done. Agnes reaches for the door. She pauses, just for a moment. She looks up at the sky, the same pale February sky that is not quite winter and not quite anything else, and she stays with it, just for a breath or two, just long enough. Then she opens the door. They go inside. Spring comes to London. It does not arrive with any announcement. It never does. It comes the way all the best things come, gradually, then suddenly, then simply as the truth of things, the way the world has always been and you have somehow forgotten until now. One morning there are snowdrops in the churchyard of St. Mary Woolnoth, small and white and absolute, pushing up through the cold ground with a complete indifference to difficulty that belongs to growing things, that has always belonged to growing things, that will belong to them long after there is no one left to notice. Joan notices. She is walking past the churchyard on an errand for her mother, and she sees them through the iron gate, a small cluster of them, white against the brown earth, and she stops. She stands at the gate for a long time. She does not go in. She is not ready to go in, not yet, not to this particular churchyard. But she stands at the gate and looks at the snowdrops, and something in her that has been held very tightly for a very long time loosens, just slightly, just enough, the way a fist loosens when sleep finally comes, not all at once but finger by finger, the grip releasing because the body has finally decided it is safe to release. She stands there. She looks. Then she goes on with her errand. You are so far down. You are in the place past words now, the place where words arrive as warmth and rhythm and the faintest shape of meaning, like light through closed eyelids, not dark, not quite light, but that warm amber nothing that is its own complete world. Stay there. I am almost done. The market is full again. Not full as it was. That fullness is not coming back, not this year. Perhaps not for years. The gaps in it too real, too many stalls belonging to people who are not here to tend them. But full in a different way, with the people who are here, who are making the market what the market is by showing up with their things to sell and their things to buy, and their voices and their arguments about prices and their particular smell of wool and fish and bread and the cold morning air. Agnes is there. She is buying onions. She is holding one up to look at it in the spring light, turning it in her hand, assessing it with the particular focused attention of someone who has been buying onions for 20 years and knows exactly what a good onion looks like. She puts 3 of them in her basket. She moves on to the next stall. She is thinner than she was in October. There are lines in her face that were not there before, or that were there, and are now deeper, the kind of lines that are not age exactly but experience, the physical record of what the face has been asked to hold. She carries herself differently too, not diminished, if anything the opposite, as though she has discovered something about the dimensions of what she can bear and has adjusted her sense of herself accordingly, expanded into the knowledge. She buys onions. She buys a small piece of saltfish. She goes home. Brother Edmund has begun a new section of his chronicle. He calls it, in his careful Latin, simply, What Remained. He writes about the city as it is now, in the spring of 1349. He writes about the market and the lightermen on the river and the birds in the priory garden, which are in full voice now, the tentative February sounds having given way to the full spring chorus complex, overlapping, entirely indifferent to whether anyone is listening, beautiful anyway. He writes about the things that have changed and will not change back, the emptied houses, the unclaimed trades, the children learning to inhabit the spaces left by older children who are gone, the way the city is redistributing itself around its own absences, the way a river redistributes around a new stone, finding new paths, moving differently but still moving. He writes about the things that have not changed, the Thames, the bells, the smell of bread in the morning, the sound of a cart horse on cobbles at the earliest hour, the way the light falls on the stone of the priory at midday when the sun is at the right angle, the particular and unrepeatable way the city sounds on a quiet evening when the wind is from the west. He writes, "I have been thinking about what it means to survive something. I used to think it meant to come through unchanged, to emerge from the difficulty as you entered it, intact, yourself, the experience, something that happened to you rather than something that became part of you. I understand now that this is not what surviving means. What survived is not the same city that was here in October. What survived is something that contains October, that has October in it the way the river contains everything it has carried, not visibly, not on the surface, but present, part of what the water is now, part of what carries it forward." He pauses. He writes, "I think this is true of people too." He closes the chronicle. He goes into the garden. He stands for a while in the spring sunlight, actual sunlight, warm enough to feel on the face, the first warmth of the year that means something, and he stands there with his eyes closed and his face turned upward and does not think about anything at all. The birds sing around him. He stays. Master William de Curie has 17 patients recovering. He has written 3 letters to Florence, to Paris, to a colleague in Bristol, sharing what he has observed over the past 6 months, the clinical data of it, the presentation of the illness and the cause of it, and the things that helped, however little, and the things that did not. He writes carefully, in the way he has always written, with the precision that is both his habit and his conscience, unwilling to claim more than he knows, unwilling to make the experience more orderly than it was. He writes, "I cannot account for who survived and who did not. This is the central fact of the thing, the one that resists all the frameworks I have. The strong died and the weak survived, and the young died and the old survived, and none of it was legible in any way that my training prepared me for. I record this not as a failure, or not only as a failure, but as a fact about the nature of the thing, which is larger than any single mind and will require many minds, over many years, to begin to understand. I do not expect to live to see that understanding. I offer what I have observed to those who come after, in the hope that it helps, in the knowledge that it is incomplete." He seals the letters. He sends them. He puts on his coat. He goes out for a walk, something he has not done, purely for the sake of walking, since October. He walks along Cheapside, then down toward the river, then along the bank for a while, watching the lighter men on the water, watching the Thames do what the Thames does, carrying its dark volume of water toward the sea without comment and without effort and without any apparent awareness of the extraordinary winter it has just witnessed. The sun is on the water. It makes the same patterns it has always made, the shifting light, the small white gleams, the way the whole surface moves like something breathing. He stands and watches it for a while. Then he walks back through the city, through the streets he knows, past the houses he has visited and the doorways he remembers and the churchyards where the snowdrops are out, back to his narrow house on Cheapside, back to his writing table and his candle and his books. He sits down. He opens his case notes. He begins. Hugh's count has reached 60 days. He said it aloud last night, sitting by the fire in the room he rents near East Smithfield. He said it to no one in particular, to the fire, perhaps, to the room, to whatever is listening when a parson says a thing quietly into the air of an ordinary evening. 60 days since the numbers turned. He is still working at the field. There is still work to do. The field that the Bishop of London acquired in November is not going anywhere, and there are graves still to be dug and properly closed, and the long, slow work of making it decent, making it a place rather than simply a necessity, the work of the living for the dead. But the pace has changed, and the change has held, and 60 days is long enough that he has stopped being afraid to look at it directly. He made a mark on the wall of his room for each day, the way prisoners mark the walls of cells, not because he felt imprisoned, but because the counting needed somewhere to live outside of his head, needed to be made real in the world, scratched into plaster with the tip of a knife, a thin line for each day the numbers moved in the right direction. 60 marks. He looks at them. Then he goes to sleep. And Joan, in the house on Grace Church Street, is already asleep. She sleeps deeply, the way children sleep when they are finally exhausted enough to let go completely on her side, her hands loosely coiled, her breath slow and regular and entirely peaceful. She will wake in the morning and there will be tasks, and there will be the ongoing fact of her father's absence, which does not become less true with time, but does become more legible, more something she can move around rather than something she can only move through. She will grow up. She will remember this winter her whole life not as a nightmare, though it was that too, but as the winter that showed her what she was made of, and what her mother was made of, and what the city was made of, which was not stone and timber but this, the willingness to stay, the small even stitches, the broth brought carefully and set down, the hand held through the hard parts, the door opened every morning onto whatever the morning was. She doesn't know any of this yet. She is 11 years old and she is asleep and the window of her room is letting in the faintest trace of moonlight and the room is warm and she is dreaming something that leaves no trace, something that is only the mind moving freely in the dark, unconstrained, itself. She breathes. In and out. London breathes. All of it, all 80,000 souls, or the 50,000 that remain, or whatever the number is that is sleeping now in the houses and the priories and the inns and the rooms above the shops and the rooms below the market stalls and the rooms by the river where the sound of the water is always there, always there. The city's oldest sound, all of them breathing in the dark, in the spring dark that is warmer now than the winter dark, that carries in it the faint green smell of things beginning. The smell of the earth deciding again to be generous. The river moves. The bells are quiet. The birds, even the birds, are quiet now, settled in their trees for the night, resting the voices they will use again at first light with the prodigious enthusiasm of creatures for whom every morning is the first morning. And in the churchyard of St. Mary Woolnoth, in the corner near the wall where the ground is slightly sheltered and the soil is a little warmer, the snowdrops that Joan saw this morning are standing in the dark, white and small and absolutely certain. They don't need the light to be certain. They are certain in the dark. This is what growing things know that other things have to learn. You have been with these people for a long time tonight. With Agnes and her onions and her small even stitches and the moment at the door that was hers and no one else's. With Brother Edmund and his chronicle and his rope and his birds. With the Curie and his drawer and his marginal notes and his walk along the river. With Hugh and his 60 marks on the wall. With Joan, asleep, dreaming something that leaves no trace. With Thomas on the first night, coming home from the wharf not knowing what he carried. With the ship on the river and the rats in the dark and the stars that watched all of it from their patient distance without comment and without judgment, the way stars have always watched. You have been with all of them. And they have been, in whatever way this is possible across 670 years of dark, with you. The city is sleeping. The river is moving. The snowdrops are standing in the dark, certain. And you are somewhere far below all of this, below the words, below the images, below the story and the city and the winter and the spring, somewhere very simple and very quiet and very dark, where the breath moves in and out with no effort at all, where the body is warm and the mind is still, and the night holds everything it is holding with the same patient indifference it has always held everything, without preference, without judgment, without end. You are held. You have always been held. Sleep. This concludes the story. Sleep well. Good night.